Crimson Rivers, Gifts. Evan, mid-lecture about the benefits of climbing, abruptly stops to say instead, "Wakey wakey, Regulus." "What?" Regulus asks, blinking at him. "Fuck's sake," Evan grumbles, scowling. "He interrupts me every time. He's so fucking annoying, you know?" Regulus stares at him in confusion. "Who?" "Come on, wake up," Evan insists, rolling his eyes, and Regulus opens his mouth to ask what the fuck is wrong with him when the tree branch snaps, making him jolt, and then his eyes split open as the whole world swirls into focus. There's a body next to him, warm and solid. Disoriented, the first thing Regulus rasps is, "James?" "No, still not him," Barty says, coming into view as he props up and leans over to peer down at him, eyebrows raised. He looks faintly amused. "After all these months, you'd think you would stop asking by now." "Fuck off," Regulus mutters, reaching up to knuckle at his eyes as he shudders out a yawn. "You were jabbering on about Evan again," Barty informs him. "He finds you very irritating, you know," Regulus says as he drops his hands, lips twitching slightly. "I think it pisses him off that you interrupt us." "Lovely. Genuinely, nothing pleases me more than being a thorn in the side of the hot ghost that lives in your dreams." "Well, he dies usually, but you keep interrupting." Barty hums. "In that case, he should be thanking me. Anyway, you get particularly chatty before you start screaming your head off, so I know now to wake you before then." "Right," Regulus sighs out, pushing up on his elbows and shifting to sit on the side of his bed, rolling his shoulders. "Time for me to get up, I suppose. You too." "No bath?" Barty asks quietly. Regulus shakes his head a little stiffly. "Not now. Later today, after I've gone out." "Bad day?" Barty murmurs. "It's fine," is all Regulus says. "I'm going to brush my teeth. You can see yourself out." "Ah, Regulus, your chivalry knows no bounds," Barty replies dryly, but he's still amused. "I do so love when you demand I come lay beside you through the night, mistake me for another man the next morning, and then immediately kick me out afterwards. Truly, you know how to make a man feel special." "Glad to be of service," Regulus quips back as he pushes to his feet. "Now, get out." "Prick," Barty calls after him. "Bitch," Regulus responds, then heads right across the hall to enter his bathroom and shut the door. For a long moment, Regulus just stands there and breathes, flexing his fingers, and then, with a sigh, he turns on the tab and grabs his toothbrush. His eyes crawl over the bathtub, scowling automatically as soon as he looks at it. As extravagant as it is, he fucking hates it. Even after months, bathing is still the bane of his existence. He does it, what's a long, grueling process that always leaves a puddle of water on the floor and makes him feel like he's failing as a human being, but he does it. He is clean by the end, and that's all that matters. He doesn't always bathe alone, which helps on the really bad days. Well, no, he always bathes alone. He'll never be able to bathe with another person in the tub with him, where they can touch him, where he can feel their fingers on his skin, but someone will be there when he needs them. Barty usually sits on the toilet and chatters away, not bothered by his nudity and fully unafraid to make lewd, teasing comments, even when Regulus is crying, which Regulus honestly appreciates. Sirius, for obvious reasons, doesn't come into the bathroom when Regulus is bathing, but he'll sit outside the door, much like Remus did, and talk to him the entire time, no questions asked. There are a lot more days where he goes at it alone, where he can come in contact with water without immediately going back to the river. Those are the good days. When Barty stays over, he always tries to catch the bad days beforehand, rather than let Regulus struggle to figure out how to ask for help. Either way, Regulus has come a long way. Progress is progress, as they say. Regulus never showers. He'll never shower again. When Regulus resurfaces from the bathroom, his mouth fresh and changed for the day, Barty is still lazing about in his bed, the idiot. Regulus sighs. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" Regulus asks flatly. "Yes, but I'm ignoring it," Barty says simply. "Go to work, Barty." "But I hate it there." Regulus shakes his head and moves over to his desk to cut on his lamp and slap open his journal. It automatically falls open on the last page he wrote on, the latest flower not quite conforming to the binding, pressing the stem flat. Regulus runs his fingers over the paddles, swallowing, then flips to the next page and picks up his pen. "Roses are red, my dad is a prick. Don't make me go to work, I'd rather die," Barty whines. That doesn't even rhyme, Regulus mutters. Barty grunts. Poetry doesn't have to rhyme. You taught me that. Anyway, it's better than what you're writing about, no doubt. Make a note of it, would you? I'm a genius. Roses are red, get out of my bed, do as I said, or I'll remove your fucking head, Regulus snaps, even as he twists his wrists and writes Barty's stupid poem in the margin, signing it with an idiot who sadly thinks he's a genius. I fucking hate it, though, just so you know, Barty grumbles as he rolls out of bed. He's just going to lecture me as soon as I come through the door, as if I care about making stupid hinges all day. And it's so hot, and my arms hurt by the end, and I don't even want to be a blacksmith, but does he care about that? No, of course not. He's just... Oi, are you even listening to me, Regulus? Mm-hmm, says Regulus, who is not. In fairness, it's not as if Regulus has never heard any of this before. He knows all about Barty's distaste for his father, and Barty's distaste for working as a blacksmith under his father, and also just Barty's general distaste with pretty much everything. Regulus can't blame him. He knows better than most the complex feelings one has for shit parents. In Barty's case, his mother is the one he tolerates everything for. If not for her, Regulus is quite sure Barty would have spit in his father's face and never stepped foot on the forge again. Barty's dad may be shit, but his mom is lovely. As Barty putters around, he continues to prattle on and complain while Regulus tunes him out, uninterested. He no longer offers Barty money, because Barty stopped taking it when his dad began demanding to know where he got it and what he did to get it, leading to a massive argument that upset his mom. Regulus knows not to offer now, even though he has plenty and doesn't mind giving Barty enough to keep his family fed, even his sorry excuse for a father. All right, I'm heading out now, Barty announces. Regulus swivels in his chair to face him. Coming by again? Not tonight. I'm going over to Casey's. Oh, are you now? Barty grins and wiggles his eyebrows. They want to blow off some steam, and I'm more than willing to provide. You can come if you want. They said I could bring along a friend. I think I'll pass. Have fun, though, Regulus murmurs. You need to get out more, Barty says with a sigh. I'm not saying sex would fix all your problems, but it would at least take your mind off of them, and you deserve orgasms. Regulus huffs out a weak laugh, because Barty says it so earnestly that it's literally funny. Coming from Barty, that's genuinely a compliment, and also basically an admission of how much he worries about Regulus. Wishing orgasms upon people is how Barty shows his love. Oh, and giving orgasms, generally, but they don't do that anymore. No, they just sleep next to each other sometimes. It's sort of humiliating, honestly. They used to get up to all sorts of filthy things when the mood struck them, and now their thing is lying next to each other without touching, because it helps Regulus sleep. He struggles to do it alone after the arena, but he also still can't stand to be touched most of the time, at least until he's really tired, close to sleep, but having a body next to him helps. Barty has learned the hard way not to touch him, especially without warning. 4.5 months have passed, and Regulus is still too paranoid to risk sleep if he doesn't have a body next to him, just so he can trick his brain into thinking he's safe. His brain believes it, too, and that's why every time he wakes up, it's James he thinks is there. Believe it or not, I'm doing just fine without orgasms, Barty, Regulus assures him. You go on and have as many as you like, though. Don't let me stop you. Barty frowns, hesitating in the doorway. You'll be all right tonight, right? Because I can cancel. Absolutely do not cancel, Regulus cuts in. I'll be fine, and if I'm not, Sirius will be around to pester me. He's supposed to stop by today. Don't leave Casey disappointed. They give me a free journal every month, so you better make it good for them. Do that thing with your mouth that you do. You'll have to be more specific. Barty breaks out into a grin and winks. I do many things with my mouth. Except shut up, sadly, Regulus says, and Barty mock glares at him before tapping the doorway and complaining about having to go to work. They exchange goodbyes, and then Barty takes all noise with him when he goes, leaving behind quiet. Regulus turns back to his journal and picks up his pen. There is a rabid beast in me. I am a bruise, the soft rod of a peach, small and split open. The seam of me screams. I was once a star, but never bright. The velvet night swallowed me. It always has. I let it still. Better to be swallowed than to swallow blood. The sight of movement outside his window catches Regulus's attention, making him lift his gaze. a gentle tug in his chest that lets him know what he will see before he even looks. This is how it goes every day. He knows this with the same steady certainty that he knows the sun will set and it will rise again. There is something in him that is aware, always so very aware, of James, especially when he is close by. Regulus leans forward slightly, braced on his elbows beside his journal, holding his breath as he catches sight of James's messy head down below, where he stands on Regulus's stoop. He lingers, just as he always does, every single day, and then he comes back into view as he starts walking away. Regulus hastily sits back in his chair, picking up his pen and pretending to write, though he isn't. He's learned his lesson by now. James always looks back, unable to resist stealing one glimpse through the window. Today is not a day that Regulus feels strong enough to meet his gaze. Carefully, Regulus peeks through his eyelashes very quickly, allowing himself to lift his head again when he sees that James is nearly at his house, right across the fucking street. James still lives with his parents, rather than moving out into the house provided for him after the games, like Regulus did. They're all still in the victor's village, 4 of the houses assigned, only 3 used. Regulus's parents in the house Sirius got after he won his games, James and Sirius in the house Effie got after she won hers, Regulus in his own after he won his. As soon as James slips back into his house, Regulus slams his pen down and darts out of his chair, pounding down the stairs at, frankly, a truly ridiculous speed. He's breathless by the time he reaches the door, and he's swift when opening it just a little, and darting his hand out to stoop down and grab what James left behind, what he leaves behind every morning without fail. The flower's blue today. Regulus leans against the door and stares down at it, his heart hammering away in his chest. From the running, obviously, and nothing else. He drags his thumb gently over the soft, thin petals in full bloom of songbird blue, his heart swollen in his chest like it has been stung. It throbs. After 4, nearly 5 months of James consistently leaving a flower on Regulus's doorstep, literally every day, you would think it would stop affecting him so much. It hasn't. Every morning it steals his breath. Every morning it makes him ache. Every morning it holds his heart hostage. As always, Regulus wanders into the kitchen with his nose buried into the flower, inhaling the scent of it, the scent of earth and something sweet. Inhaling like he can find a trace of James lingering underneath it all, even if he never does. He twirls it against his nose until it makes him sneeze, which is somehow satisfying, and then he drops the flower into the vase on the windowsill facing the backyard, pushing it toward the back of the banquet. Just like every other day, Regulus plucks 2 flowers from the front that James left for him days and days ago, then darts off back upstairs. It's practically a routine at this point. Regulus uses one of the flowers to replace a dying one in his previous journals that he's already filled, and the second flower goes in between the pages he's writing on today. The flower, it's pink, sits on the desk as he picks up his pen again. Another flower in bloom. It speaks for you, soft, softer than you've ever spoken. There is strength in your voice, loud and shameless, bright. So bright, like the sun, even now. The flowers grow towards you. I hear you, and I... Listen, listen, I am listening. I cannot drown you out. I no longer wish to. I no longer wish to try. Like the flowers in bloom, I grow towards you. I grow, if I cannot climb. James stops into the kitchen to kiss his mom on the cheek, squeezing her shoulders as he does. Effie leans into it with a smile, but she doesn't step away from the stove. Very quick today, Effie notes. Yes, well, I didn't spend 20 minutes debating on whether I should knock or not this time, James says sheepishly. He heaves a sigh. I have to head out, so there was no time for it, really. I'm meeting Mary at the school. Taking Sirius with you? Effie asks. If he wants to go, James tells her, shrugging. He probably will, if he has no plans to bother Regulus today. Effie hums. You'll both be home in time for dinner, yes? We wouldn't miss it, James teases, leaning over to rub his head all over her shoulder, chuckling when she huffs in mock offense and ruffles his hair. A few minutes later, James walks through the house and finds his dad in the main room, chucking chopped logs into the fireplace. The sight of it makes James's heart clench, as it always does. James never chops wood for his parents anymore. Monty handles that now, even though it must be brutal on his back and knees. He does it without complaint, though, and puts the hatchet away somewhere James doesn't have to see it when he's tending to his flowers. "Oh, I've got it," Monty mumbles when James moves over to crouch down beside him with a grimace, helping him toss the last few logs into the fireplace. "James—" "Ah, it's fine, Dad," James cuts in quickly, ignoring the twinge in his leg and the truly grotesque pop his knee just gave when he dropped down. He's 26, and sometimes his body makes noises that sound like he's much, much older. It is both horribly funny, to him at least, and mildly depressing to basically everyone else except Mary, who laughs along with him and says they can start a band because she has a bad elbow that cracks every time she bends it. "Thank you," Monty says graciously when the last log goes in, and he reaches out to pass his hand over James's hair, rubbing his head affectionately. His parents are full of little touches like that, randomly reaching out to touch him as if to make sure he's really here. Even to this day, James soaks it up every single fucking time. "Come on, old man, let me help you up," James teases, then turns right around and needs his dad to help him up, which makes him burst out laughing when Monty looks smug. "I am in my prime, I'll have you know," Monty declares. "Tell me, young man, what's your excuse?" "Mom," James calls, "Dad's making fun of my leg again." "Flee," Effie calls sharply, and James grins as Monty throws up both hands, his eyes twinkling in amusement despite the way he pretends to grumble. James stifles a laugh as he heads to the stairs, and Monty sweeps into the kitchen to appease his wife, declaring that their son is a dirty, rotten liar who only intends to drive them apart. The stairs, as always, are not James's favorite invention in the world, but he skips the fold-out seat Sirius built and installed for him that runs on a mechanism along the railing to ride him up when his leg is giving him too much trouble. It's not too bad today, and he knows his limits by now, after nearly 5 months of learning them. James has a mild limp when he reaches the top, but he's walked it out by the time he reaches Sirius's room. He doesn't bother to knock, because they've never really knocked, honestly. Sirius is awake, tugging on a shirt over his head. James wolf whistles. "Keep it in your pants, Potter," Sirius mutters as he shakes his hair out of his face. "I'm afraid I might not be able to. You are a vision," James says mock breathlessly, fanning his face. Sirius's lips twitch. "Damn right I am. Hottest bitch on the block, and don't you forget it." Well," James bares his teeth in a grimace and tips his head from side to side. "I mean, Regulus is right across the street, so—" "You're biased, Romeo," Sirius says, rolling his eyes. James snorts. Yeah. Speaking of Regulus, are you planning to see him today?" "Yes," Sirius replies, narrowing his eyes. "Why?" "Calm down. I'm not going to try and tag along," James mutters, exasperated. Sirius is fiercely territorial of any and all time he spends with Regulus, and just territorial in general, though he never stands in the way of them seeing one another if that's what they want to do. Except they never do. "I was just asking because I'm meeting up with Mary again today, and I thought maybe you'd like to come with." Sirius's eyes light up. "Oh, I'd love to, if I have the time. How long are you staying, do you think?" "For a few hours, at most. I was thinking of stopping by and helping at the market again afterwards, unless Mary has some other plans I can crash," James admits. "I'll see how my day goes, yeah?" Sirius says. James nods. "Yeah, just thought I'd offer. Mom's making breakfast, by the way." "Should have led with that," Sirius blurts out, then practically shoves James out of the way to rush out of the room, singing out greetings and demands for food as he crashes down the stairs and no doubt bursts into the kitchen. There's a pause of silence, then, "James, they're kissing again!" "Euphemia and Fleeman Potter," James bellows as he marches out of the room, hopping onto the railing of the stairs and sliding his way down with a grin, making sure to ease himself down rather than jump when he reaches the bottom. He sets his face into a scowl before entering the kitchen, arms crossed in disapproval as he pins a scolding look on his parents, who are glancing between him and Sirius with twin looks of amusement. "We don't accept such filth in this house. All overt displays of affection are prohibited and enforced with the threat of eviction." "Flee, be a dear, and spit in my mouth," Effie says. "Anything for you, my love," Monty replies immediately, leaning in with a grin while Sirius and James start protesting loudly and rushing forward to pull them apart. "Rebels," Sirius hisses, squirming his way between them and shaking his head. "Absolute heathens, the both of you." "You can't wrangle our passion," Monty says. "Nor can you replicate it. You could only be so lucky to have what we have," Effie adds, fighting a smile. James coughs to cover a laugh. Sirius, I don't know how we can keep living in these conditions. It's torture, Sirius agrees dramatically. Effie holds out a full plate to him, and he brightens instantly. Well, would you look at that? Suddenly, I'm so happy to be here. Stockholm Syndrome, James whispers. I'm never leaving, Sirius announces, which only further proves James's point. They share a look, then have to look away so they don't dissolve into laughter. There is this warmth and laughter and love stored in the kitchen, like the familiarity of the spice rack, and James can feel it shaping itself into his mind, a memory in the making, one he will cling to when he needs to remember, when he needs the reminder. The one thing James can't ignore is the emptiness at his side, just a little colder than every other part of him, a carved-out space begging to be filled. Regulus would fit there, leaned up against him, tugged under his arm, and whispering bitchy remarks in James's ear to leave him in stitches. Regulus would fit here, with James, with his family. Regulus would fit so well that his absence is felt. James feels it, always. After all this time, you'd think he'd be used to it by now. Sirius and James have claimed portions of the backyard for themselves, and though it goes unspoken, it's very much known that what's theirs is theirs, and theirs alone. Sirius, Effie, and Monty do not mess with James's flowers in any way, and they do not knock down beehives or hornets' nests, and they do not leave tools that can be picked up and used as weapons out for James to see or grab. This was all learned through trial and error. James, Effie, and Monty do not come inside Sirius's shed, and they do not move his tools around, and they do not make requests for him to build anything specific, only grateful for whatever he gives them. This also was learned through trial and error. That's life, though. A whole lot of trial and error. The last time Sirius was over at Regulus's, he saw the pens and pencils scattered all over his desk in his room, the one that Sirius built for him, and made the mental note to build something to hold them. It's nothing fancy, not the most intricate thing he's ever built, but it will work. Just a wooden container big enough that the pens and pencils should clink into with ease, hanging out for easy access at the top. The outside carved into in nonsensical patterns because Sirius got bored. The varnish has made it all shiny and smooth. Sirius builds things again, makes things, anything really. It started with making James a cane, so he could get rid of the one the Hallow provided him with. The first one was all right, but Sirius thought he could do better, so he made a second one, then a third and a fourth, as well as a fifth, which James is using now when he needs his cane. Sirius is currently working on the sixth, improving each time he does it, a little attached to the routine of it. James keeps them all. In any case, making the first cane sort of broke through something in Sirius, and then suddenly it was like he couldn't stop making things. Clothes, trinkets, furniture, it doesn't matter, he does it all. He knits, he carves, he works with glass and plastic and clay and wood. He just tinkers, basically, all of the time. Most things he doesn't finish, some things he still breaks, a few things he finishes to perfection, then destroys before anyone can see it, in a fit of rage and emotion that overwhelms him. But he never stops. He always goes back to build again, and something about that soothes him. It wasn't easy, picking it back up after 10 years. That first cane he made was honestly shit, even though James used it with no issues. Maybe Sirius is just dramatic, but to him, the sight of it made him want to gouge his eyes out, so he'd insisted on doing better the second time around. That's pretty much how he's gotten good again. Old habits and his relentless determination to accept better from himself. The sound of derision in his head that mocks his failures still takes the shape of his mother's voice, even to this day. On the way out the door of the shed, penholder in hand, Sirius taps his biggest project in the corner, under the sheet. He still finds new things to do with it, and likely will until it's finally put to use. James and Regulus's bookshelf is there, the one mentioned only once, from some other life, and he's made it into this one for them to have whenever they're ready. Sirius believes they will be someday. He dares to hope so, at least. It's not a very long trip to get to Regulus's house, seeing as he's right across the street. Not as far from their parents as Sirius would like, but close to him, so he deals with it. He wanted to toss Walburga and Orion out and leave them homeless, but Regulus had asked him not to, begged him not to, really, which is the only reason Sirius didn't. They were hard on Regulus after he got back, too hard, so it was no surprise that he eventually snapped. It had taken less than a week, just a few days of Wilburga telling him to take a shower, refusing to have a son who didn't have proper hygiene, who wouldn't present himself properly. Then, when Orion dared to try and drag Regulus into a shower fully clothed and screaming his head off so loud that Sirius heard it all the way down the street and immediately came running, everything sort of just went to shit, honestly. Sirius had burst in on Regulus, quite literally choking Orion to death, and he did admittedly consider just letting him do it. In the end, he didn't, because he knew Regulus would only be more fucked up from it, and honestly, dealing with the auras and repercussions would be a fucking chore. So, Sirius pulled him off, the only one who could, because he was the only one strong enough to, though Walburga had been making an attempt, to no avail. Regulus was lashing out and rather feral at the time, so Sirius had to genuinely drag him away. That very same day, he helped Regulus move out, and their parents haven't had anything to do with them since. They're afraid, Sirius knows that, afraid of their own child, which Sirius finds some sort of fucked up poetic justice in. After all, their children were once frightened of them. Now they know how it feels to be on the other side of it. Their sons are murderers, and they never really seem to grasp the full horror of such a thing until it's their lives at risk. In any case, Regulus is both better and worse off for essentially being disowned, the same as Sirius. It hurts him, but it's for the best, because Walburga and Orion don't care about the trauma either of them have in the aftermath of the games. They never did, and why would they? It's not as if they cared about the trauma Sirius and Regulus carry in the aftermath of their childhood, the trauma they caused. It's gotten better, though. 2 months ago, Sirius coaxed Regulus over to Andromeda's to visit her and properly meet Ted and Nymphadora. Andy, despite all the years that have gone by, where Regulus never visited or acknowledged her at all, due to Wilburga and Orion forbidding it, welcomed Regulus in without batting an eye, not commenting on his limp, greasy hair or his frail, willowy frame barely holding itself together from the exhaustion. It was a bad time, 2 months ago, but with time, things have slowly gotten better. Sirius knows the cycle. He's lived it. Things are very bad, then they get a little better, and then they get much worse. And then they're just okay. And then it's unbearable, and then somehow, inexplicably, it's really good. Over and over, so it goes. Regulus and James and Sirius are good now, all at the same time, which is very rare. But it won't last forever. It just gets further and further apart, letting them learn how to live with it. Reggie, Sirius calls, knocking on the front door and poking his head inside to wait for the habitual granting of entry. Regulus has never, not once, refused to let him inside. This time, there's silence. Sirius does not panic, not like the first time he got this response. Regulus never refuses him if he's around, but he's not always around. Sometimes he's just gone. No one knows where he goes, and no one can find him. Sirius maybe had a legitimate breakdown the first time this occurred, so now Regulus tends to leave a note, just in case. And yep, there it is, a note in the kitchen, where it always is, reading, "Don't have a meltdown, I'll be back, R.A.B." Sirius turns and immediately heads back out to go up the stairs, letting himself into Regulus's room. It's an invasion of privacy, technically, but also not really because Regulus likes it. Sirius knows he does. Knows he likes to come home and find Sirius invading his space like there's nothing holding him back from doing so. A sure sign that they're okay. He sits down the pen holder on the desk, his lips briefly twitching when he sees the closed journal with a pink flower sticking out the top like a bookmark. Not pressed together between the pages just yet, meaning he'll probably write some more later. Sirius doesn't read Regulus's diaries. He respects that boundary, despite his curiosity, and he's aware that Regulus would lose his collective shit if Sirius did. Regulus is the same way about his writing that James is about tending to his flowers, and Sirius is about building. With a sigh, Sirius throws open Regulus's window and perches on the edge of his bed, taking out his pack of cigarettes to light one up, peering up at the sky as he waits for Regulus to come back, looking at the clouds and missing the moon. There's a tree on the edge of the mayor's property, neighboring the mortuary in District 6. A tall tree with thick, looping limbs and a hefty trunk, gnarled roots practically cemented into the ground at the base, like seats for Regulus to perch on. It's an old tree, probably 50 years old, quiet and solitary as it overlooks the aftermath of death. Technically, the tree is on the mayor's property, though Regulus doubts the mayor ever sees him out here, because he's never once come out to complain. The mortuary, being close by, might have something to do with that. No one comes to the mortuary, except for the mortician, but even he only shows up when it's necessary, when someone has died and there's a body to tend to, a funeral to plan. Regulus is generally alone out here, him and the tree. Most people don't like the reminder of death. It's a morbid thing, isn't it? Something that sends a shiver up the spine, looking at the building where grief and loss bleeds out the windows, where death clings to the walls. Regulus knows better. Death is everywhere, so there is no avoiding it. In any case, Regulus likes this tree. He thinks Evan would have liked to climb it. Regulus never has, even though he tells himself each time he comes that he will. He'll finally do it. He'll grab on and keep going until he reaches the top. Regulus never even leaves the ground. The tree has indentations in the bark from where he's thrown daggers into it repeatedly, because he spends a lot of time just doing that. Maybe it shouldn't soothe him, but it does. He thinks it always will. It's hot out now that summer has barreled its way in. Regulus isn't a fan of it, frankly. He sweats more in the heat, naturally, which means there is more of a need to bathe, but at the same time, he's never cold at night, which he actually likes. He associates cold nights with the arena. With a grunt, Regulus snatches his dagger from the tree and slips back, his chest heaving from the force in which he just threw it, his body delightfully achy. He's always careful not to cut himself, because the first and only time he did, he ended up vomiting violently, which he found incredibly ridiculous, seeing as it was only a small bit on his finger. Like an idiot, he'd stuffed his finger into his mouth to instinctively soothe the small cut. As soon as the taste of iron hit his tongue, it was over for him. He hasn't made that mistake again. Regulus thinks about tossing his dagger again, but stops and squints up at the sky against the harsh glare of the sun beating down on his sticky skin. He's been out here for hours, so if Sirius did decide to come over, then he's no doubt waiting for him. Regulus is wary of keeping him waiting too long. The memory of how bad that went over the last time never too far away from his mind. Sirius had not handled it well. So, with mild reluctance, Regulus blows out a deep breath and sweeps his hair back from where it hangs soggy and damp over his forehead, trying to cling to his sweaty skin. Yeah, he's going to have to bathe tonight. The thought makes his stomach turn over, so he ignores it for a bit longer. It's a bit of a walk to get back to the victor's village. Regulus passes where Barty is, but he doesn't stop, unwilling to be a catalyst to another explosive fight between him and his father. He bypasses the market, unwilling to interact with people. After the market, he passes the school, which he steals glances at, telling himself he's not trying to see James, even though he is. He knows through Sirius that James spends a lot of time there with Mary, and Sirius also goes as well when he has a chance. Sirius has invited him multiple times, swearing Mary won't mind, promising him that it would be good for him. Regulus never goes, but he'd be lying if he said he hasn't thought about it, if only to see James. The only issue is the children. Regulus can barely function around grown adults, so he knows he'd be a lost cause around kids. Nymphadora is turning out to be an exception, but he doesn't want to test the theory with other children. Finally, Regulus makes it back to the victor's village, walking the same path under the streetlights, even though they're not lit up. The same path he's walked for years. He has to pass his old house, where his parents are, and he dares to take a glance. He doesn't see anything, of course. Sometimes he does. Sometimes his mother is leaving to go out, or his father can be seen walking past a window. Sometimes he misses them. Sometimes he wonders what he's even missing. As soon as Regulus opens the door and steps inside, Sirius is there, pulling him into a stiff hug that makes Regulus's body tense as a bolt of confusion shoots through him. Sirius never touches him unprompted, or without a clear sign of warning, so that Regulus can pull away if he needs to, and on the really bad days, he knows not to touch at all. The fact that Sirius is hugging him before anything else sets him on high alert immediately, as does the panic in Sirius's eyes when he lets go. Hey, Regulus, just letting you know James left after you did, but he should be home soon, Sirius says, holding his gaze, clearly trying to convey something Regulus is honestly just not getting. What the fuck is he on about? What? Regulus asks, baffled. Is this like a bad day of some sort for Sirius? James isn't. In fact, why don't I go get him? Sirius cuts in hastily. He'd like to know you two have a visitor, I'm sure. Regulus somehow gets more stiff, and he holds his breath for a beat while Sirius looks at him, practically pleading with him to go along with this with his eyes. So Regulus exhales and slowly nods. Yes, I'm sure he would. Who's the visitor? The Master of the Hallow himself, Sirius declares, somehow managing to sound delighted by this, despite the fact that there is no smile on his face. He's in your kitchen. Ah, Regulus says, hoping like hell that it doesn't sound like he's just being punched the way it feels. He swallows thickly, clears his throat quietly, then sets his shoulders. Well, I suppose I shouldn't keep him waiting then. I'll keep him company while you bring James home. All right, sure, Sirius replies lightly, like it's no big deal, but he drags Regulus back into a hug, and this time Regulus reflexively hugs him back, holding tight. Sirius ducks his head to whisper in his ear, I'll be quick. James lives here, and you love him very much. Am I clear? Got it, Regulus breathes out, and Sirius gives him a squeeze before pulling away, heading out the door. For a second, Regulus just breathes, and then he starts moving towards the kitchen. He's not afraid exactly, just cautious. It confuses him why Riddle would show up here, but maybe it shouldn't. After all, what he and James did no doubt pissed the man off, but it's been months. It's over now, pretty much. Sure, there's the Victor's tour coming up in a month and a half, but that's the last Riddle will ever have to see or hear of James and Regulus, because it's not like they're going to be mentors. Sirius is too beloved by the Hallows to be replaced, and he wouldn't let them take his place anyway. In the kitchen, there are 2 armed oars standing on either side of the doorway as Regulus steps inside, which honestly puts him on pins and needles immediately. He thinks about the dagger strapped to his side, under his shirt, and forces himself not to even form the thought that he could use it. Riddle is indeed in his kitchen, just casually sitting at the table with a closed briefcase right in front of him. He doesn't smile when Regulus comes in, but he does raise his hand and flick his fingers, which makes the oars file out. Regulus, thank you for joining me, Riddle says, his voice smooth and clear. I apologize for making you wait, Regulus murmurs as he moves to sit across from him as soon as Riddle gestures for him to do so, commanding the space around him like he owns it all. I wasn't expecting a visitor today, or I wouldn't have. That's quite all right. Sirius was a nice host while I waited, Riddle replies. He flicks his gaze over Regulus, critical and sharp. You look overheated. Yes, well, that tends to happen in summer. Perhaps it would help if you were dressed appropriately for the weather. How silly of me, sir. I never even thought of that, Regulus says flatly, staring at Riddle blankly, because he doesn't care for whatever verbal spar Riddle is trying to drag him into. They both know he's covered in scars. They both know exactly why he's still in a long-sleeve shirt, even now. Riddle's lips turn up at the corners, but it seems more like a muscle spasm than a sign of amusement. He reaches out and rests his hand on his briefcase, lightly tapping it with one finger. I must admit, I was ever so slightly disappointed when I arrived and found that both you and James weren't here to welcome me, or even either of you. Perhaps it was foolish, but I at least expected you to be out together. I'm his lover, not his keeper, Regulus replies. We do have other things to do during the day, besides staying up under one another all the time, just like any other couple. Ah, you'll have to forgive my confusion. I was under the impression that your love for each other was different from everyone else's, Riddle announces, tilting his head. Regulus's mouth goes dry. Trouble in paradise? Riddle asks, watching him closely. No, Regulus says softly. Everything is fine. Fine. Just fine? Riddle continues. Regulus struggles not to grind his teeth as he corrects. Perfect, actually. Riddle regards him for a long, long time in complete silence, his fingers steadily, rhythmically tapping on the briefcase. His eyes are a deep brown, objectively striking, but the empty echo of them makes them look like bottomless pits. They're so cold and sharp, like shards of ice stained with rust or blood. The sight makes Regulus feel nauseous. You know, Regulus, when I first saw you at the introduction parade, you intrigued me, Riddle murmurs. Did I? Yes, because I thought I saw myself in you. The determination in your eyes spoke of hidden strengths. Most tributes show fear, but I did not find any in you that day. You surprised me by turning out to be weaker than them all. Sorry to disappoint, Regulus says stiffly. Riddle just hums. You're not the first. You will not be the last. As it stands, we're not alike at all, but I do think we both share an appreciation for speaking bluntly, with no illusions of what's being discussed. Let's speak freely now, Regulus. Of course, Regulus agrees. I do not subscribe to the silly notion that love, Riddle's lips curl in distaste around the word, can be comparable from person to person, that it can be greater between one pair of lovers than the next. Everyone believes they intend love, just from the depths that they feel it, but this is not the case. Yours and James's love, for example, has no need to be held in higher esteem than anyone else's. Just like any other couple, you said. Yes? Just so. We agree on that. I never claimed that it was greater, Regulus tells him. Maybe not in so many words, but that is nonetheless the shield you picked up when you were under fire. Riddle taps away on the briefcase. Whether or not I do, the people in the Hallow believe in that silly notion, Regulus, and that is the only thing that keeps you and James alive. Regulus doesn't react to this, forcing himself not to, because he knew this already. They're speaking freely, right? Clearly they are, because Riddle sure is. The people of the Hallow are why that silly notion exists to begin with. That may be so, Riddle allows, but it is now your responsibility and James's to keep that silly notion alive. Your willingness to die for each other at the end of your games can only be sourced from an act of love that creates obsession within everyone else, because they feel as if they can never experience that same great love, so they idolize it, they cherish it, they would go to desperate lengths to see it flourish. You will show them that it has. I'm aware of what's expected of me, Regulus croaks, because he's not stupid. Riddle shakes his head slowly and taps away. I'm not sure that you do, because there can be no doubt, Regulus. There can be no person that looks upon you and James and has even a flicker of it, even one moment to think that perhaps what you and James did, what James did specifically, was born not out of a greater love that doesn't really exist, but out of defiance. Because if it was defiance, then that means opposition gets results, and that, too, is a silly notion, and this is one I refuse to allow people to believe in. What will you have me do? Regulus whispers. Convince them, Riddle says simply. He pauses, then opens his briefcase with 2 clicks, lifting the top but not reaching inside. He holds Regulus's gaze over it. Convince them all, and do so without allowing even one person to think it comes from a place of fear. Better yet, convince me. You said you didn't believe in the silly notion. Then I press upon you the importance of changing my mind, Regulus. Even if I do not believe in it, I want to see that you do. James, I have no doubt that he does, but you, well, I think we have this in common as well. Prove me wrong again. Okay, Regulus murmurs. Are you afraid? Riddle asks. Regulus holds his gaze. No. I do so hope when the time comes you will learn to lie better, Riddle murmurs, hand dipping into his briefcase before he pulls out a jar and sits it down between them. Inside it there is a Horcrux hornet, sitting lazily at the bottom, its glowing green pouch casting a sickly, shimmering glow on the inside of the glass. The Horcrux hornet is still only for a second before the wings flutter and it flies right at the glass toward Regulus, responding to the fear that digs claws into his skin and leaves the taste of blood in his mouth. Riddle closes the briefcase. James watches fondly as Mary's class shrieks and runs from the door as soon as the bell signals that the day is done, bursting from the school to run home, or run right to the parents that are waiting for them outside. James never went to the school, but Sirius and Regulus did before Sirius finished his games and they came into the victor's village and had access to personal tutors the same way that James did. Mary also went to the school, then ended up becoming a teacher, as well as joining administration. She teaches art throughout the morning to the children from ages 5 to 10, then switches to the children from ages 11 to 16. James usually comes in and essentially works as her assistant when he has the time and it's a good day for him. She can always find him something to do, whether that's cleaning up after the children or just passing out papers when she'd rather not get out of her chair. Though it goes unsaid, they both know why he shows up. Not only because he adores Mary and enjoys spending her lunch break with her, which is where this all started, but because the children soothed something in him. See, it started by accident. For the first 2 months, James didn't really see anyone, excluding his parents and Sirius. He only ever left the house to bring Regulus a flower every single morning. Sirius, of course, never pressured him, but he also never failed to try and help, and one day he convinced James to come along and have lunch with him and Mary. So James went, and he felt better for it. He kept going back, and even when Sirius didn't have the time or was busy with something else, so long as Mary let him show up, he went. Eventually, one day, she seemed to pick up on the fact that he didn't really want to leave, even when lunch was over, so she invited him into the classroom. He was wary, but he went, and he instantly lit up around the kids. The younger ones generally don't watch the games. Their parents tend to not let them if they can help it, so most of them didn't even know about what he'd done in the arena, and they treated him as they would any other adult that was kind to them and worked hard to make them laugh. The older ones do watch the games. Their parents usually can't stop them when they reach a certain age and fully grasp what the fuck they are, so they do know about his time in the arena. But there is an instinctive tact that even children have about the subject, especially when they're at risk of one day entering the arena themselves. Of course, not always, though. James has been asked questions, hard questions, invasive questions, even rude questions, because children are children, and that is what they do. But Mary generally handled it for him and kept her kids respectful. If not, he figured out the polite response, which was that he just didn't want to talk about it, and he needed them to respect that. And they did. Kids aren't unreasonable, really. They're just curious. To a degree, they're even scared for their own fates. James gets it. In any case, spending time with Mary and children has worked wonders for the state of his life. Of course, it can't really fix everything, and he still has more bad days than good ones, but he is so fucking thankful to have this anyway. The sound of a child's laugh, their innocence, the comfort they can bring just by giving a hug or telling him they're happy to see him. It makes him feel more alive somehow. He sees vanity in them sometimes, catches sight of her out of the corner of his eye when he hears a delighted gasp, looks for her when a beetle crawls over his shoe, sees her in the smile of one young girl and the tears of another. He tries not to see Hodge, but he's there too. Boys pretending to be princes, boys trying to find their way in the world, boys celebrating their 15th birthday because they get the chance to. Some of them remind him of Regulus, and that's when he works out that Hodge reminds him of Regulus. A Regulus that never happened, a young boy in the arena just trying to survive, lost and never making it home. Regulus could have been Hodge if Sirius didn't volunteer for him. James? Jolting, James gives a harsh blink and whips his head around to stare at Mary in surprise. For a second, he doesn't know when he is. Before the arena, during, or after. Who's alive and who's dead, and where's his hatchet? Where's Regulus? This still happens to him frequently. The flow of time feels out of order and disjointed, and sometimes he has to find his place in it, because the current can snatch him when he's least expecting it to. Things trigger it, of course, like a cold night, or a hatchet on the ground, or too much pain in his leg, but it can also just happen randomly. He's talked to Sirius about it, who has confessed that it's similar to his issues with his memory. Sorry, what? Did you say something? James mumbles, settling back down in the present, in the classroom, in the summer. I just asked if you wanted Bingley and I to walk you home, or if you were going to the market today, Mary murmurs. James smiles reflexively and glances over at Bingley, who is grabbing his bag from the cubby at the back of the classroom. Bingley is Mary's little brother, quite literally half her age at 13. It's the first year he'll be in the reaping, and Mary has been fretting about it, seeing as she's just aged out. Like Sirius, James has no doubt that she would volunteer for her little brother, if that's what it came to, but she can't. Bingley is a funny kid, always cracking jokes and playfully complaining about having his sister as his teacher, even though it's clear he actually loves it, and her. No, I think I'll go to the market, James muses, waving her off. Mary and Bingley usually walk him home, or almost home, when he's still hanging around at the time of the day, because they head in his direction anyway. Really, technically, James walks them home, but he knows as well as they do that it's actually for his benefit. He likes not being alone. Well, if you're sure, come on, so I can lock up, Mary instructs, jerking her head to get James moving. I can't wait around for you all day, Potter. Oi, get a move on, Bing Bing. Coming, Bingley grumbles as he rushes to follow James out into the hall. James waits with him as Mary locks up the classroom, swinging his cane lazily around, doing tricks with it to make Bingley grin. James takes it with him wherever he goes most of the time if he leaves the house, even though he doesn't always need to lean on it, and he knows his leg will be fine. It's a sense of security should the need for it ever arise. Mary blows a few curls out of her face as she joins them in walking down the hallway, and the heat is so bad that James can't blame her for pulling it back from her face and tying it up on top of her head in a beautiful mass of tight curls. He asked her once if she thought about cutting it, because she kept complaining about how hot she was during the summer, and she explained that she hadn't had her hair cut since she was 9 and told her mom that she was a girl and wanted longer hair. James, on the other hand, gave in and sheepishly asked his mom to cut his hair just a little, but it's starting to grow out again. Meanwhile, Sirius shrieked and ran into the opposite direction when Effie offered to do the same for him. Monty laughed so hard he pulled something in his back, because he is indeed an old man. Sirius and Mary love to get together and complain about the effect the heat has on hair and makeup and even outfit options. James thinks about Regulus, who can always be found in a long-sleeved shirt and slacks, no matter the temperature. It makes his heart clench, because he'd thought to ask why one day, and Sirius hadn't quite answered. But the look on his face was explanation enough. The scars on Regulus's neck are still visible, always visible, and James had felt like a fool to not realize that Regulus had scars just like them in other places as well. He's never seen them, but he'll never forget the sight of Regulus coming out of that river, ripped into and bloody. James! James! At the sound of Sirius frantically calling his name, James's head snaps up as he grasps his cane and automatically steps in front of Mary and Bingley, on guard instantly. But it's just Sirius, running right towards him, panic in his eyes. What? What is it? James blurts out. You need to come with me right now, Sirius gasps out, not even telling Mary and Bingley hello, as he usually would, which means this is not a joke. Is everything okay? Mary asks sharply, standing in front of Bingley with her arms wrapped back around him. Sorry, Mary, no time to explain. James, come on, Sirius insists, already backing up. James doesn't need to hear anything else. He doesn't hesitate to start running, the adrenaline pushing him to keep up as Sirius sprints back towards the victor's village, with James hot on his heels. He wants to know what's going on, but they're both running too hard and too fast to really talk. James's leg will no doubt be pissed at him for this later, but at the moment he doesn't particularly care. They don't slow down until they make it to the victor's village, and then Sirius is hastily snatching James to a more sedate place as he leads up to the street. They're walking now, but quickly, and Sirius is gripping James's arm tight. Sirius, what's happening? James wheezes. Riddle is here. He's at Regulus's with him right now, Sirius explains, his tone short and clipped. His face is alarmingly neutral, but he doesn't sound pleased. James feels his heart drop as his fear surges. He may have implied that he didn't like the idea of you and Regulus not being an actual couple, so I may have implied that you two live together and are a very real, very happy couple. So you are going to go in there and act accordingly for the betterment of everyone. James's eyes bulge as he hisses. You did what? Sirius, I haven't so much as spoken to your brother in nearly 5 months. Well, if Riddle doesn't know that already, I'd like to keep him from finding out, so just go with it, Sirius hisses back, throwing him a sharp look that lets James know he's absolutely not fucking around. And yeah, alright, that's fair. It's a very intense situation, and James doesn't want anyone in danger any more than Sirius does. That doesn't stop his heart from racing as Sirius drags him to the door and lets them inside without so much as a stutter. James tells himself it's from the running. James hasn't ever been in Regulus's house, for obvious reasons. He's been to Regulus's house, or at least to the front door, but that's all, and this is his first look. He doesn't know what he's expecting, but it's more bare than he thought it would be. It feels empty and echoey, like it's gutted, like there's no signs of life cradled within the walls, like it's hollow. The first thing James makes note of are the two oars standing outside a door past the stairs. They don't react when Sirius gestures to the door, and they don't protest when Sirius opens it and leads them outside. Riddle sits at the table, immediately visible, while Regulus's back is to the door. There's a briefcase closed in front of Riddle, and a jar sitting between him and Regulus. James comes to a screeching halt as soon as he sees what's inside. Vespa. No, not Vespa. Vanity wouldn't keep Vespa in a jar. Where did Vanity even get a jar? Where's Vanity? Why is Vespa trying to fly? Who's afraid? James is. James is afraid. It takes him a moment to realize it, because fear isn't helpful in the arena. But, of course, he's afraid. He's in the fucking arena, isn't he? Is he? Where is he? When is he? The flow of time yanks him back and forth, and he exhales, trying to plant his feet. It helps that he's somewhere he's never been before. Not before the arena or during, so it can only be after. It's hot, absurdly hot, so it can only be summer. The victory tour hasn't happened yet. Riddle is here. The Horcrux Hornet in the jar is not Vespa, and Vanity is dead. Regulus has not turned around, but his shoulders are tense. He surely heard them come in, but he's still facing Riddle, who is watching James and Sirius with critical eyes. It feels like a test, and James remembers that, in a way, it is. He needs to pass it, so he smiles and walks forward without looking at the jar again, ignoring the muffled flutter of thin wings and the dull thump as the Horcrux Hornet hits the glass over and over. The curls at the back of Regulus's neck hang heavily, damp with sweat. James focuses on them as he gets closer, and then he drags his hand over Regulus's shoulder delicately as he leans down to kiss the top of his head like he does it every day. He does not, obviously. Sorry I'm late, James says, lifting his head to look at Riddle with a smile. We weren't expecting visitors today. Oh, that's quite all right, James, Riddle says, inclining his head as he pushes to his feet. Regulus was the perfect host, and we just had a lovely chat. I'm afraid I can't stay longer. A shame, James murmurs, gently squeezing Regulus's shoulder, which is as stiff as a board under his hand. Why don't I walk you out? Yes, I'd like that. Riddle reaches out and taps the top of the jar. I'll be leaving you two with this gift. It makes for a marvelous nightlight. To that, James can't figure out how to respond, but he pulls away from Regulus slowly, not trying to move too fast. James leads Riddle right out of the kitchen, trying to act like he's comfortable here, like he knows this place in his sleep. The oars follow behind them, guns in hand, and James forces himself not to react to the danger. It's hard, his instincts screaming out in protest at leaving his back open to a threat. Have a safe trip back to the Hallow, sir, James says cordially, nodding politely as he opens the front door. I will, Riddle tells him. He stops across from James and regards him for a moment, then cocks his head. Quick question, James. Which cabinet does Regulus keep his coffee in? I would have liked some, but it slipped my mind to ask. Trick question, James thinks, before promptly answering, with easy confidence. Regulus doesn't drink coffee. He doesn't keep it anywhere, or I'm sure he would have offered. Riddle gives him a thin smile. You're smarter than they give you credit for, you know? Yes, James agrees, holding his gaze. I know. And yet, you're still the fool, Riddle says softly, lightly clicking his tongue, and then he leaves with the oars following close behind. James swiftly closes the door, blowing out a deep breath before pressing his forehead to the wood and squeezing his eyes shut. For a long moment he just stands there and breathes, his heart still thumping hard in his chest. His whole body shakes as he comes down slowly from the adrenaline and fear. Eventually, James convinces himself to turn around and go back into the kitchen, entering cautiously, very unsure about his welcome. He always thought, or hoped, that the first time he stepped foot in Regulus's house, in his space, would be because Regulus invited him in. And now, after everything, that's been taken from them too. Sirius is crouched down beside Regulus's chair, murmuring low and fervent in his ear, not touching, but clearly checking on him. Regulus is letting him, nodding slowly, his head ducked forward. James can't hear them, but Sirius glances over when he notices him coming back in, and Regulus lifts his head and swivels to look at James as well. It's the first time they've properly looked at each other since getting off that train and going in separate directions nearly 5 months ago. James has seen him through his window many times while dropping off a flower every morning, but that's about it. Regulus rarely looks back. The first time he did, James knows it was an accident. He remembers it fondly. He turned back to steal a quick glimpse of Regulus, just one, and at the same time, Regulus had lifted his head and stopped writing to glance out the window. James had watched as Regulus caught sight of him, then immediately fell out of his chair, only to pop back up seconds later, see James still there, and slowly sink back down again. Sometimes Regulus looks back on purpose. He makes a point to look at James, or James thinks he does at least. On those days, James stands in place and doesn't move until Regulus looks away again. On those days, James feels like his heart is going to beat right out of his chest. Most days, though, Regulus doesn't look. That's okay. He always leaves his curtains open so James can look, and that means something. It has to, doesn't it? James hopes so. "I'm sorry for intruding," James blurts out, his mouth dry as he takes in every detail of Regulus's eyes, closer to them than he's been in months. Sirius said. "No, it's fine. We didn't really have a choice," Regulus mutters, huffing out a weak laugh, and looking away with a grimace as his eyes sink shut. And how fucking awful is that? They never have their choice, do they? Everything between them is circumstantial, but maybe it's always going to be that way when they're never making choices for themselves. Maybe it's always going to be that way, period. Maybe this is all they get to have. "Is he gone, Riddle?" Sirius asks, standing up. James nods. "Yeah, he's gone." "Did he say anything to you?" Regulus murmurs, looking over at him with a sharp gaze. It's been a while since James has been under the intensity of it like this. Perhaps it's ridiculous, but it flusters James, makes him feel nervous and fluttery. "He just asked which cabinet you kept your coffee in, and I don't. And I told him you didn't drink coffee," James finishes quietly, which makes Regulus stare at him, visibly startled. James clears his throat. "Then he told me I was smarter than people give me credit for, yet still a fool. Very charming, isn't he?" "Something like that," Regulus says flatly. Sirius crosses his arms. "And what did he say to you?" "Nothing I didn't already know, really." Regulus heaves a sigh and reaches up to pinch the bridge of his nose, looking very, very tired. When he drops his hand, he slumps back against the chair and sweeps his hair back from his face. Fuck, but he's so unbearably beautiful. Basically, he's expecting James and I to keep playing up our love story on the victory tour. He said we, mostly me, have to convince everyone and him, and that I have to make it believable. He doesn't want anyone to get the idea that defiance will get them anywhere. There was a threat behind it, so we can't fuck it up. "Okay," Sirius says carefully. "Well, you're right, we did know this already. He just wanted to remind you in person?" "I think he wanted me to realize how crucial it is that I don't fuck it up," Regulus says. "I also think he wanted to make it clear that he doesn't believe it wasn't an act of defiance, and if things are going to work out for us, I need to change his mind." "You don't think we can?" James asks warily, because Regulus looks so fucking worried at the moment. With a hoarse laugh, Regulus tips his head back and looks up at the ceiling as he rasps. I think his mind is already made up. "We'll figure it out, Reggie," Sirius murmurs. "When the time comes, you and James you'll do what needs to be done. It's going to be okay, I promise." "How long?" Regulus demands bluntly. "Tell me, Sirius, how long is it going to be this way? How far are we going to have to take this?" Will he have to move in? Will we have to get engaged, get married, adopt children? Sirius looks away, swallowing. James tries not to let it sting to hear Regulus speak of all those things like he doesn't want them. James wants them, but not like this. Not this way. He thinks that's what Regulus is upset about, not what he's actually referencing, or he hopes. Neither of you will have to mentor, Sirius mumbles, his eyebrows furrowed. Unfortunately, you're always going to be under the Hallow's thumb. So basically, we're stuck together forever, Regulus asks, an edge to his voice. Thanks for making that sound like torture, Regulus. Really appreciate it, James snaps, unable to help it. Regulus cuts him a sharp look. Don't start. This isn't about us. This is about the fact that we have no fucking choice. It's our life, James. It's ours, and they're controlling it. How the fuck can you expect me to be okay with that? I don't. I'm just... James sighs and shakes his head, his shoulders sagging. Never mind. You're right. I'm sorry. Reggie, stop being a prick, Sirius mutters with a frown. It's not his fault, and really you could do a lot worse. But I'm not. I haven't even... Fuck off, you don't get it, Regulus insists, clearly frustrated. I do. Trust me, I do, Sirius says softly. Look, I know it's fucked up, all right? But we don't know the future, or how any of this will go. It could be 20 years, or the Hallow could be swept up in something new and shiny from the very next game, and you two will fade into the background. I don't know. We don't know. What we do know is that we're all in danger if we don't put in the work on the victory tour. So that's what we need to focus on first. Agreed? Yes, Regulus grumbles, deflating a little. Yeah, James agrees, subdued. Sirius sighs again, world-weary and sad. Dorcas should be arriving with Pandora in a month to get you two ready for the on-screen interview to kick off the victory tour. Until then, we keep our heads down and stay out of trouble. Fine, Regulus snips, sounding bitter, and then he pushes to his feet and swipes the jar off the table with the Horcrux hornet in it in one swift motion. Now, if you'll both excuse me, I'm going to bury this in my backyard. James has his cane up in hand and snaps it out in seconds, pressing the length of it across Regulus's chest to stop him right in his tracks. Regulus does stop, stiffening as he turns his head to stare at James, who stares right back. No, you will not, James declares sharply. If you don't want it, I understand, but I'll take it. You're not taking it. It's fucking dangerous, Regulus grits out, glaring at him. I'm going to wrap it, put it in a box, then bury it so deep that no one will ever find it. Just try it, James warns, holding his gaze, not backing down an inch. I'm not letting you leave this room with it. Letting me? Regulus retorts. You can't fucking stop me. Hey, now, Sirius warns, sounding wary. James flexes his fingers around his cane. Give it to me, Regulus. I'm not joking. It's not safe, James. If it gets out, I won't let it out, but I'm not letting you fucking bury it either. Just for fuck's sake, stop being stubborn and give it to me. I'll take care of it so you don't have to worry about it. You think I'll worry about it less if it's around you? Regulus asks with an incredulous scoff. He shakes his head and carelessly shoves James's cane down. Please, James whispers, swallowing harshly as he looks at Regulus, meeting his eyes. Regulus visibly wavers, his face softening pretty much immediately. It's not safe, Regulus murmurs, lips tipping down. Please, Regulus, James begs, genuinely begging at this point, a lump forming in his throat. Vanity she wouldn't want it buried. Please, just, I need it, all right? I need it. James sees Regulus give in. Something in him soars, because Regulus's gaze goes gentle with building compassion, and James thinks that Regulus can't refuse him what he needs. There's something about that, something special. Okay. Regulus takes a deep breath and holds the jar out, though he doesn't let it go when James grabs onto it. Don't open it, James. Just be careful, all right? I mean it. Promise me. I promise, James replies instantly. Regulus hesitates, but then he lets the jar go and slips back. James holds it to his chest in one arm. Thank you. I'll go now. Sorry for... Regulus snorts weakly, then James gestures awkwardly to his cane, which he sort of used against Regulus. Don't worry about it. For what it's worth, it was nice to, see you again. James fights a smile, but he loses, and he's more than happy to, especially when Regulus's cheeks turn red. Regulus clears his throat loudly, then turns round and sweeps off into the kitchen, muttering under his breath as he goes. James watches him with a goofy grin, only to tuck his lips in as soon as he sees Sirius staring at him in an unimpressed fashion. "Go home, James," Sirius says. "Right, yep, doing that," James replies quickly, dutifully nodding his head and backing up. "You coming?" "I'll be over in time for dinner," Sirius tells him, and James nods before leaving. On his way out, he tries to snatch one more glimpse of Regulus before he goes, but the only thing he sees is a bouquet of familiar flowers sitting on the windowsill. Just like every other night, Sirius crawls out of his window to perch on the roof before bed. He lays back against the tiles and blows out a deep breath, trying to let go of the mounting tension from the entire day. Oh, what a day it's been. "Remus," Sirius mumbles, "you are not going to believe the day I just had. Honestly, I don't even know where to start." Sirius sprawls out and shares his thoughts with the moon, gazing up at it with a deep, ever-growing yearning, snarling and snapping its jaws in his chest. The moon is beautiful, a glowing dome in the dark that blankets the earth, and it's still a poor substitute for Remus, but it's all he has. For now, it's all he has.